There's a guy in Tampa, Florida, who spent most of his career doing something completely unrelated to drones. He got into them the way a lot of people do. Bought one, flew it around, got serious about it, got his Part 107, started doing some real estate photography jobs, then inspection work, then mapping. Then he sold the drone business. Then he started teaching other people to do what he'd figured out to do, mostly on his own. He built a YouTube channel, he built a course, he built a platform called Pilot Byte. At some point, he went on the drone network. But at some other point, and I don't think there was a clean moment where this happened, he became a professional in an industry that didn't have a name for what he was when he started. That trajectory, hobbyist to operator to educator to industry figure, is not unusual in the drone mapping world. It's an archetype of sorts. The job didn't exist in any recognizable form 10 years ago. There was no career fair booth. There was no degree program specifically designed for this. There was no obvious on-ramp. There still mostly isn't. And yet, the drone industry is very real. The drone mapping industry is very real. It's growing fast. All of this needs people, and the disconnect between how significant that need is and how invisible the career path remains, that's what this episode is about. Welcome to the Drone Network, the only podcast in the air and on the airwaves. I am your host, Bryce, and on this show we document the tech, economics, and people piloting the world's largest standardized drone imagery network. Each episode, we explore how drones are reshaping industries, creating new economic opportunities, and literally changing how we see the world. Today, the invisible job market. What the drone mapping profession actually is, and why it's so hard to find, and what it means that the people who figured it out mostly had to invent their own paths to get there. We're going to start this one with some numbers. As of 2024, there were over 385,000 FAA certified remote pilots under Part 107 in the US. That's the commercial certification for people who have passed the knowledge test, demonstrated they understand airspace rules, and are legally permitted to fly for compensation in the United States of America. That number has grown from essentially zero in 2016, when the Part 107 was first established. That's a profession that went from, again, zero, non-existent, to nearly 400,000 certified practitioners in 8 years. It's now 2026 at the time of this recording, and I am sure it is a much larger number. The global drone industry workforce is now estimated at over 2.1 million people worldwide, having added roughly 127,000 employees in 2024 alone. This is according to a StartUs Insights analysis of industry data. The global commercial drone market is projected to reach $54.6 billion by 2030, growing at a compound annual rate of about 7.7%. These are numbers that should produce a clear career pipeline. The kind where guidance counselors know what to say, where LinkedIn job boards are full of postings, and there's something of a straight line from I want to do this to here's how. If you've ever heard the expression learn to code, it does seem, maybe not quite at that scale, but I think it exists. But that pipeline just doesn't really exist yet. Understanding why probably requires understanding what drone mapping actually is, and why it doesn't fit neatly into any of the boxes that professional infrastructure was built around. When most people think about drones as a profession, they think about one of two things: military and defense applications, which are very real, but very separate universe, or the kind of content creation that made the DJI mini-series so famous. This is real estate photography, wedding videography, cinematic reels. A drone pilot is a visual storyteller. That's a real profession. It's a significant part of the market. In 2023, photography was the single largest segment of drone services by revenue, holding about 34% of market share, according to GMI research analysis of the global drone photography services market. But here's the thing that gets undersold. Mapping and surveying is not just competing with photography for market share. According to the Drone Industry Insights, mapping and surveying is actually the most common commercial drone application across nearly all industry verticals. Present in construction, mining, public administration, agriculture, waste management, environmental monitoring, and more. It's not glamorous. It doesn't produce footage that goes viral. It produces geotiffs and point clouds and orthomosaics that go into GIS software and engineering platforms and insurance underwriting models. And its growth trajectory is outpacing photography significantly. The mapping and surveying segment is expected to grow at the highest rate of any drone service category through 2032. This is infrastructure work, not content work, and the professionals doing it came from somewhere. They just didn't all come from the same place because there was no single place to come from. So one thing I have actually done quite a bit of in this industry is I've talked to a lot of people in it. Something I've noticed very quickly is how different their entry points were. There's the surveying and GIS track of people who came up through traditional geomatics and land surveying, discovered drones could do in hours what their crew used to do in days, and they retooled. Or they were one of those people who trained on a drone, and they understand coordinate systems, reference datums, ground control points. The drone was just a better way to capture data that they already knew how to work with. There's military and emergency services track. People who flew manned aircraft, worked in search and rescue, spent time in roles where aerial perspective mattered operationally. They already understood airspace, mission planning, and the discipline of executing structured flight paths. The civilian drone mapped onto a skill set they'd spent years building. There's the photography track. People who bought drones for creative work, got good at them, started getting commercial jobs. They had to learn the geospatial fundamentals from scratch, but they had the flight hours and the hardware. And then there's a fourth track that's becoming more common. People who came into this with no particular background in aviation or geospatial science, but who found their way through YouTube and online courses and self-directed learning, got certified, got a few jobs, got good, built a practice around it. What all of these entry points share is that they're informal. They're paths that people found, not paths that were designed. There is no drone mapping degree as far as I know. There are Part 107 certification courses, photogrammetry courses, GIS programs that have started incorporating drone-based data collection, surveying programs that teach UAV methods, but there's no single institution that says, here is the complete professional formation of a drone mapping practitioner. You're assembling it yourself from components. But here's the thing about invisible job markets. They're not actually invisible. The work is real, the demand is real, the compensation is real. What's invisible is the legibility of their associated career paths. And legibility matters a lot in professional markets because most people don't go looking for careers they can't see. A high school student researching careers can understand what a nurse does, what an accountant does, what a software engineer does. The job has a name, the training has a name, the hiring process is understood, the certification process is clear. The network of jobs that make up the drone mapping profession, drone mapping specialist, geospatial data analyst, UAV survey technician, aerial intelligence operator, these titles don't have the same cultural weight yet. They are real jobs, they pay real money, but they don't have the signal clarity that draws people in early. So this is creating a lag. The industry needs practitioners. The practitioners exist, but they got there through idiosyncratic routes that are hard to replicate intentionally. And the gap between demand and a supply of people who know what they're doing is being filled partly by people who figured it out and partly by people who are figuring it out in real time while working on it. Dronell's job market research found that drone service providing job postings more than doubled between 2018 and recent years, going from 176 to 374 posted positions in their tracked sample. And this is just a sample, not a total count. The actual number of people working in some form of drone services is far, far larger. The job market is there. The road signs to it are not. So what makes this interesting right now is that platforms like the Lair Drone Network are almost incidentally creating a new entry point. Something like the Spexi app is a standardized, paid, structured way to fly missions that don't require you to find your own clients, negotiate your own contracts, or figure out your own deliverable formats. You fly a mission, you earn the reward, you learn the pattern. For a lot of people, that's a legitimate on-ramp into a more serious commercial practice, which is something traditional job markets almost never provide. But that's just one interesting on-ramp that's come around in recent years. What does it look like when someone does successfully build a professional practice in drone mapping? What are the components? The foundation in the US is certification with a Part 107. That's the baseline, not because it teaches you everything, but it teaches you airspace, which matters operationally and legally. And without it, you're not legally working commercially, and you're operating without a professional floor. Other G7 countries like Canada don't have the certification baseline. As a result, smaller barrier to entry, but even less of a shared foundation for drone pilots, though I will say there are plenty of courses in Canada to learn and get started, and quite a few pilots have recommended them, especially if you are quite literally just getting started. But from this foundation brings us to the second layer, hardware and mission fluency. Knowing how to plan a mapping mission, setting altitude relative to your target ground sample distance, planning image overlap, understanding when to use GCPs versus RTK positioning. This is where most of the actual skill in drone mapping lives. The hardware is accessible. The knowledge of how to use it systematically is what separates someone doing amateur flyovers from someone producing deliverables clients can actually use. The third layer to this is data processing. The flight itself is maybe a third of the job. Turning those images into an ortho mosaic, a point cloud, a 3D model, an elevation surface, that's photogrammetry. And photogrammetry is a skill with a real depth to it. Software platforms like Pix4D, Drone Deploy, Agisoft Metashape, they've lowered the entry bar significantly, but understanding why a model processes correctly, how to diagnose artifacts, how to verify accuracy against checkpoints, that all takes time and experience. The fourth layer here, sitting at the top, is domain knowledge. Drone mapping for construction monitoring is not the same as drone mapping for insurance inspection, which is not the same as drone mapping for ecological surveys. The data types and deliverable formats and client expectations differ. The most versatile practitioners understand at least a few of these verticals, so they're not wholly dependent on one client type. What I'm getting at is none of this is unteachable. None of it is exotic. But there is no single credential that certifies all of it, and there's no single institution that trains for all of it. The best practitioners have assembled it from multiple sources. Certification courses, online tutorials, YouTube channels like the ones run by Dylan Gorman, who took the time to explain what photogrammetry actually is, and how GCPs work, and what a deliverable pipeline looks like. That kind of education has been load-bearing for an entire generation of drone mapping professionals. Something to note is that pilots using the Spexi app to fly autonomous 7-minute missions only require that first layer, foundational certification, and a degree of hardware and mission fluency, the second layer, but not the degree to sit at the top of that pile, more the one to enter it. The more experienced pilots on the network may have that second layer of professional knowledge, but it's Spexis and the network itself that are forming around data processing and domain knowledge. And put another way, less specialized drone work can still form the basis of specialized services that form the invisible drone job market. This is all to say, the drone job market is here, but its edges, its on-ramps, its exits are invisible to drone operators, to data customers, and platforms alike. Supply and demand both exist in a sort of fog of war. And that's because while drones might form the foundation of this job market I'm describing, it's not drone services that customers are actually after. It's what those drone services enable. The professional infrastructure will catch up eventually. It always does. Surveying was once an informal apprenticeship trade. GIS was once an esoteric specialty that only certain kinds of analysts knew. Now both have degree programs, professional certifications, career tracks, and recognizable job titles that a hiring manager knows how to evaluate. Drone mapping is in the middle of that transition. The skills are real, the demand is real, the compensation is real, the jobs are real. What's still forming is the scaffolding around it. The credentials, the career designations, the educational pipeline that makes the path visible to someone who hasn't stumbled into it. In the meantime, the people who are building this profession are building it the old-fashioned way. They're doing the work, sharing what they know, creating the educational content that didn't exist when they were learning, and demonstrating through their own trajectories that this is a real career with a real future. That's historically how new professions work. Someone has to go first. Someone has to make the path visible by walking it, and then turning around and putting up a sign. And the sign is getting clearer. The path is getting more worn, and the destination, a recognized, well-compensated, professional class of aerial data specialists, is real enough that I think we're going to look back at this period as the moment before it all became obvious. Anyways, that's this episode. I've been Bryce Bladen. This is the Drone Network. Thank you so much for listening. Just want to take a moment to thank some of my sources on this episode. I got my FAA Drone Zone registration statistics from the FAA.gov/UAS site. Got my global drone workforce and market size stats from Stardust Insights Drone Report of 2025. You can see that at stardust-insights.com. I think it's on their Innovators Guide side. Other sources, dronei.com, SNS Insider at the GMI Research, and UAV Coach coverage. Thank you again for listening. Hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks for being a part of the Drone Network. Subscribe wherever fine podcasts are served to get a new episode every week. And remember to leave us a 5-star review on your podcast app of choice. It helps a lot. Today's show was sponsored by Spexi Geospatial and Layer Drone. Learn more about standardized drone imagery built for global scale at spexi.com, that's spexi.com, and layerdrone.org. Thanks again for listening.